Hey guys, how's it going? Firebox here. Did you know that I get asked every single stream if Dungeonborne is dead? Well, the answer is yes, and I'm going to explain to you how Dungeonborne fell from 39,000 players down to one singular player. I was here from the very start to the bitter end, and I think I can give a little bit of insight on some of the very strange decisions the developers made, ultimately leading to a player base that did not trust the devs anymore, and eventually the complete downfall of this game. The first thing that I can remember having issues with was the Druid class. Back in July, when I first noticed how strong this class was, I saw that they had permanent wall hacks, and there was a big red minimap marker that they could always see other players on. If you look at the gameplay in the background, you're going to see an example of this, of me playing Druid back before they ended up nerfing it. And this really was probably one of the first cues as to what kind of balance we were in store for. And you know, it's kind of funny, hindsight is 2020. Looking back at this, I can really see why the balancing went so bad over the course of the next few months, because it took a little while for them to really fix this problem, even though they did fix it. And this was really just the tip of the iceberg of the awful imbalance that this game had as far as the PvP goes. Which is going to lead me into the second major issue this game had, and that's going to be the Klothos pay-to-win trials. While I don't have any gameplay of Klothos, I'm going to do my best to try to explain why this mode kind of broke the game, and this kind of started around August. So this was a 3x3 game mode where you could earn gear and gold, and the people who won fights typically were the people who spent the most money on gear. Imagine, if you will, if in Dark and Darker, one team had a Fulgore, Akuma's Claw, and Akuma's Fang, and the other team was running around in purple gear. Who do you think is going to win that fight? Well, guess what? It's probably going to be the artifact players. And that's exactly how Klothos went down. You couldn't lose your gear, so people were able to acquire the best gear in the game, typically through RMT. It was kind of joked about being the RMT trials, so people would pay real money through, shady websites of gold in order to acquire this gear, and they would be invincible, and they were able to use the Klothos trial to infinitely farm gold and very good quality gear that made the rich richer and the poor basically unable to play this game mode. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Druid wall hacks, pay to win, trials that just kind of breaks the balance of the game. Well, it already sounds pretty bad, right? But you've seen nothing yet. I am going to bring you probably the biggest problem Dungeonborne ever had, and what probably lost them more than half of their player base, and that is going to be life on hit. What I find most interesting about the life on hit is that Dark and Darker went through the same exact problem just a few weeks ago with the Hatchet Barbarian build with Blood Exchange right after the buff. So life on hit in Dungeonborne was basically a stat where you could get plus additional HP on multiple stats of gear, and every time you would hit somebody with a weapon, you would get that much HP. So with the dual wield swords, you would gather about, I think it was about 20 life on hit. So every time you hit somebody with those swords, every single one of the swings would give you that HP. And Death Knight, one of the classes in the game, had an aura around you that would also give you additional HP, resulting in you being able to W key and absolutely annihilating every player in the game with absolutely no risk of dying, because you constantly are healing yourself and you're giving the other people no chance of surviving. This even further made the problem of poor players just getting bullied by rich players, because the rich players were running around with crazy life on hit builds with absolutely ridiculous gear, while poor players were stuck in trash, just being fodder for these other players. Now, eventually, life on hit does get fixed, but you're going to notice a pattern. Something else comes up, a new problem arises, and that's going to be time-gated legendaries. Now, imagine, if you will, in Dark and Darker, if a Fulgore was only droppable once every 24 hours. Okay? Now, I want you to imagine that Fulgore, okay? You can dice it, meaning that that item, if you die, can never be lost. So do you know what happens when you have items that are only obtainable once every X amount of hours by the entire player base, by the way? So one Fulgore can only drop every 24 hours, period. And then the people that have the Fulgore will never lose it and can play on infinite loop in dungeons. Well, number one, it creates massive RMT because people are paying big money to take these weapons into dungeons themselves. And number two, it makes boss farming completely useless because there were Chinese discords set up for RMT where people would farm these bosses on a timer. And the moment that a boss could drop a weapon again after that 24-hour dropped, they all shared the information with each other and would farm the bosses at the moment the boss weapon was available. And nobody would ever get those items outside of a very limited group of players. What's really interesting about this is the developers seem to deny, or at the very least were very silent about this for quite a while. This took, if my memory serves correctly, over a month, maybe even 2 months to correct. It was being discussed around the Reddit at first. Mods were deleting it as misinformation. And then eventually, way down the road, they finally addressed it and did fix the issue. But at this point, it was starting to become too little, too late for Dungeonborne. Now, this is quite possibly one of the funniest mentions on this list, but that is going to be the Minecraft cosmetic. For God knows why, the developers decided that it was time to release this ugly-ass skin into the game. They added this, like, little pickaxe here, and then this torch, okay? Now, keep in mind that the previous cosmetics were pretty well received. This is what they released the first time around, okay? Regardless if you like Dungeonborne or not, or ever did, I think most of us can probably agree that this gear set feels a lot more, you know, game fitting into a genre like a extraction game that's hardcore PvP than a Minecraft skin. So just one of those little things that almost sounds stupid to talk about, but funny enough, there was a pretty good amount of backlash regarding this specifically, so I thought it was worth mentioning. Another big change the developers decided to make that really isolated the player base was the reduction in playable servers. Originally, you could play on US East, US West, Europe, Asia, and South America. There might have been some other ones too. Eventually, they consolidated down to just America, Europe, and Asia. Not only did this screw over players on US East and US West, resulting in one or the other having bad ping, but it also completely screwed up South America players. These guys bought microtransactions, they paid for the game, and the developers, without warning, removed their server. And as a result, they were on unplayable ping. I think some SA players said they were, I mean, it was a lot. I don't know their exact MS, but it was basically unplayable for them. And the players felt cheated out of not only their money, but their time. And I did speak to Hellhammer about this at one point, and he said that it was out of their control, and they just didn't have enough players to support those regions. But you know what's interesting is they might have had enough players to support those regions if they didn't continue to make bad game decisions. And then, of course, removing those servers just further plummeted the player base even further down to where we are today. Now I want to talk about probably the final nail in the coffin for Dungeonborne. So right now, it is August 2024. The developers last posted on 8/18 talking about some Twitch event. And that was the last we heard of them in announcements. You have to keep in mind that this is in the midst of all of the issues that I was just talking about throughout this video. Finally, a month later, Hellhammer comes out of the woodwork that big changes are coming to Dungeonborne. He's promising to fix the game. Hoorah. We're down to a few thousand players, and there's a huge preseason and season 1 event that's supposed to be taking place that, again, he's promising is going to fix the game. It's going to come with revamped difficulties, huge map changes, economy fixes, new content, and much, much more. Well, guess what? Most of it never happened, and the content that did release was fundamentally broken. One of the biggest problems with this update was that it broke the matchmaking, and you couldn't find lobbies. You would sit in the lobby for what seemed like forever, and you would end up spending more time there than in games. And eventually, players started to quit, because as players sat in lobbies for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, really even up to an hour before it timed out and the game just stopped working. People didn't want to sit in lobbies for that long, so the few thousand remaining players that were dedicated to this game completely quit. They even released an entire roadmap that was supposed to happen for Season 1, which again, just simply never happened. Now you might be wondering, how did I get roped into this game up until the point where it just completely died off? Well, let me tell you why. Hellhammer was still messaging me personally, with grand promises of the game still being worked on. Here is a screenshot from October 14th, 2024, of Hellhammer himself confirming the development was still happening. He says there's no more patches except bug fixes until Season 1, because we're focusing on the development of the game. And instead of spending our efforts on low-effort band-aid fixes, as he calls them, he wants to address everything for Season 1. He says it's important to stress that the wipe itself will fix a lot of issues too. Teamers were also a big issue in the game. Just really bad. Every game just had groups of players hunting down the lobbies. So he promised that everything was going to be fixed for Season 1. They were talking about reevaluating the circle changes, adjusting player numbers per game to hopefully fix the games not starting. They were going to add some kind of pet system, a battle pass. Like it or not, that's what they were going to do. They're going to add a quest system, more progress, class and combat reworks, PvE, experiences, new monster types, some kind of marketing events with Twitch drops and stuff like that. And, you know, I was kind of convinced that they were still working on this game really until the bitter end. I really got strung along by this guy for quite a while. And it was unfortunate because I actually really did enjoy playing this game, but these have to be one of the worst set of developers that I have ever personally dealt with. So that is going to be the story of Dungeonborne. The game is dead. It is very, very likely not coming back. Please stop asking me if the game is dead. The answer is yes. I will probably never play this game again. Even if it came back, the developers would have to pay me to play this game. I would never, ever give my time and day to supporting this company, especially after getting completely ghosted and how bad they did the community. So I will personally be moving on my channel, of course. I currently play Dark and Darker, and I do plan to play some of the new Extraction games coming out, hopefully with some better brand developers. Thank you to Pressure for supporting this video, and be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. I will be sure to make more stuff on my channel soon. Thank you all. Have a great day.